What's up YouTube? It's me, Sir Lawrence, and I'm here with the 1989 Toyota MR2 that we upgraded in the previous video. Now it's time to tune it, and I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about getting that tune dialed in perfectly. Let's go. First thing the tuning screen presents you with, tire pressure. This setting adjustment will affect your tire grip, temperature, and your driving feel. With a higher PSI, your steering will feel more responsive and you'll have a higher maximum grip, but your vehicle will be more prone to suddenly losing grip while cornering and at high speeds. With a lower PSI, your tires will heat up much quicker and you'll be less prone to sudden loss of grip. The sweet spot here for PSI is between 26 and 35. Personally, I like to keep mine at 32 because that's what my real world vehicle is at, and that works for the game as well. If you're having issues with oversteer or looking for a better turn-in response, raising the front PSI a bit could help you out with that. Next up, gearing. This is the screen where you adjust the gear ratios of your transmission. Sport transmission unlocks the final drive value, whereas race transmission unlocks everything you see here. Now, if you added power to your car, which you almost always do, your gearing will probably be too short. Ours seems okay in this case, but to fix the short gearing, you would have to adjust the final drive. The usual best practice for this would be to adjust it until your last gear is just a bit off of the end of the graph. You want to see it clip off just at the end. The number down in the bottom right of the gearing graph isn't necessarily the top speed that your vehicle will reach, but it's not far off. It's theoretical top speed. For the individual gear adjustments, I find it's best to leave these alone because final drive does exactly what I need it to do. These are worth messing with when you're making a drift build or some other hardcore tuning that we're not going to get into. Okay, moving on to alignment. This is one of the most important tuning sections. Adjustments made in this screen can drastically alter the way your vehicle handles. Starting with camber, which is the vertical angle of the wheel from the front perspective of your vehicle. The goal of camber is to put more tire in contact with the road when cornering, and this gives you better control of your grip while cornering and under braking. Setting camber to negative will point the top of the wheels inward, and a positive camber will point the top of the wheels outward. A general rule of thumb is don't use positive camber. Not saying it's useless, just isn't the most useful. I typically like to set my front camber to about 2.5 and my rear camber to about 0.05, just to give it a good amount of camber in the front and rear without having too much for a road-going race vehicle. Not much science behind the values I chose here, except for 2.5 is half of max and 0.5 is two values lower than 2.5. Moving on to toe. This adjustment alters the wheel's horizontal angle from the front perspective of the car. Adjusting toe out will point the front of your wheels outward, while adjusting toe in will point the front of your wheels inward. Just think of toe as if the tire had literal toes. You point the toes out if you want to induce oversteer in your build, or if you're looking for more turning response. You'd point the toes in if you're looking for more stability or to induce understeer. However, adding any toe in either direction will increase your tire temperatures and decrease your top speed and make your vehicle less stable. So when adjusting these, adjust sparingly. On front wheel drive and all wheel drive builds, you can add a bit of toe out to increase oversteer, and on rear wheel drive builds, you can add a bit of toe in to keep the rear stable when cornering. It's important to note, do not max these values out because they will destroy your build. Too much toe is a no-no, so only make minimal adjustments here. For this particular build, we're going to put negative 0.2 toe so that we get a little bit toe in so that we can have a bit more stability in our rear when taking turns. Now the caster. This adjustment changes the vertical angle of the suspension from the side of the car. A lower value means the suspension is straight up. A higher value means the suspension is angled towards the back of the car. Usually you want a higher caster because it has the added benefit of adding camber when cornering while not affecting camber on straights. I prefer to keep this between 5 to 7 degrees, reserving 7 degrees for drift builds. For road racing cars, I like to set it to 5.5. Okay, that's all of alignment done for now, but to perfect your tune, you'd probably come back to this screen many times to make a few more adjustments. So get familiar with this screen and you'll learn what these do over time. Okay, moving on to anti-roll bars. What these do is they tie the left side and the right side of the suspension together. This is a very important tuning adjustment no matter what your drivetrain is. A low value in the front will give you oversteer, while lowering the rear will give you understeer. You'll notice the difference in your mid-corner turning response and corner entry as well. For this vehicle, I'm going to set it at 36 in the front, 28 in the rear, mainly because I like round numbers and also because I want my front to be a bit more stiffer so that I can have a little bit more control while turning. Next, springs. The general idea here is the heavier or lower your car is, the stiffer you want your springs to be. So if you're in a low slung race car or in a 3,800 pound Bentley Continental, you want your springs to be a little more on the stiff side. Lowering your front spring stiffness will increase your oversteer, while lowering your rear spring stiffness will increase your understeer. An overall soft suspension will be less responsive to input but have more grip, while an overall stiffer suspension will be more snappy but with less grip. There are many calculations you can do to find the perfect spring level, but I prefer to keep it simple by leaving it stock. If you do adjust your springs, you want to avoid extremes. On front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive builds, it can be beneficial to have softer springs in the front to help counter the natural understeer. What we're going to do is stiffen the front springs a little bit to counter the natural oversteer of a rear-wheel drive car. That number looks good. Let's leave it at that. Ride height is the setting that controls your vehicle's center of gravity. It's good to have this as low as you can without bottoming out, but it's ultimately up to you and your personal preference. I like to put mine random numbers, even, low. Moving on to damping. This is another really important screen because damping controls how your car responds to imperfect road conditions and weight shifts, which happens every time you turn. Bump is the rate of spring compression, while rebound is the rate of spring extension. Ideally, your bump value should be about 50 to 75% of your rebound value. There's a lot of math involved to get the exact values, but I can say for sure that you want to keep bump on the lower end to keep your suspension from bottoming out. Only want to raise your bump if you notice your car bounces or is unstable while driving. Having high values in the front will give you more rear grip, while high values in the rear will give you more front grip. For this build, we'll set it to 14.0, 10.0. Let's take this down to 6.0 and 8.0. Just because I like round numbers, and this will give us an optimal driving feel. Next, Aero. We don't have any Aero adjustments unlocked on this vehicle. You unlock these by installing a race splitter and an adjustable spoiler. This card will be good without it, but let's go over it anyway. The parts that offer Aero adjustments give you the ability to adjust the amount of air resistance pushing down on the car or downforce. This is less important on lower class, slower vehicles, more important on faster vehicles. I'd say S1 and above. The more downforce you have, the more grip you'll have at high speed. The trade-off is that you'll also be lowering your acceleration and top speed, but on some builds, this is a worthwhile trade. High front downforce promotes oversteer and gives you a more responsive steering feel, while high rear downforce will give you more cornering grip, but if set too high, you'll notice understeer and a much lower steering response. No values to input here, so let's move on. Brakes. The brake balance controls how much braking force goes to the front or to the rear. A lower value below 50 will send more braking force to the rear wheels, causing understeer. A value above 50 will send more braking force to the front wheels, causing oversteer. Make sense? I like to set mine to 48 or leave it at 50 on the dot. For now, we'll leave it at 48. Your braking force controls how easily your brakes lock up or enable ABS if you have it on. A higher value means quicker locking. I like to set mine to 110% because I like my brakes to work 110% harder than everybody else's. Last but not least, differential tuning. Your differential controls how much power goes to the left or right wheel, and it only exists on the drive axle. Rear-wheel drive and front-wheel drive cars will only have one diff. All-wheel drive cars will have two. A value of 0 means that the differential is open and that all the power will take the path of least resistance. This is not easily noticeable unless you have one wheel off the ground. Then you'll see that the car won't send power to the wheel that is in contact with the ground. On the opposite end, an acceleration value of 100 means the diff is locked, which causes both wheels to move at the exact same rate. Full lock is only really recommended for off-road and drift builds. You want to avoid full diff lock on regular road cars because it is much easier to lose traction. For a rear differential, you want your acceleration to be between 50 and 90%. We have a rear differential, so we're going to set ours to 50%. If you had a front differential on a front wheel drive car, you'd want your acceleration value to be between 10 and 50%, with higher values giving more understeer. The deceleration should never be set higher than the acceleration value. Lower deceleration values can help reduce understeer and help with corner entry stability. We're going to leave ours at 30% because that's a nice value. It's lower than 50 and it's going to get the job done. If this were an all-wheel drive car, there would also be an adjustment for the transfer case or center differential. It controls your front and rear wheel drive balance, essentially making an all-wheel drive car drive like a front wheel or rear wheel drive car at either end of the slider. For road cars, I like to adjust the caster to 60 to 80% to give a little more oversteer to all-wheel drive builds. This car is an all-wheel drive, so that's neither here nor there. And that's all. From here, it's good to take your car and drive it around your favorite circuit. I like to take mine to the Horizon test track. Let's see how the times compare to the previous unmodified car. Also, on the right side is a Mercedes-Benz SL65 AMG that we'll be using as a benchmark. Onto the first straight, you can hear the supercharger and the MR2 whining. Fully tuned MR2 is on the left, untuned MR2 in the center. Coming up on the speed zone, all three cars hard on the brakes as the Benz enters at 100 miles an hour and exhibits a bit of oversteer as the tuned MR2 holds its line and its speed. Exits the speed zone at 90 miles an hour, 85 for the untuned and 81 for the stock Benz. Rolling up to the third corner, all three cars taking the same line around the top of the hill. Benz oversteers a bit and smokes the tires. Smooth sailing for the MR2s. Through the test track gates, and the tuned MR2 seems to have a solid lead as we come towards the drift zone. 0 points is the goal here because that means you didn't slide. MR2s pass, the Benz immediately oversteers and starts drifting. Coming up to the bridge in the final chicanery section, smooth again from the Toyotas. No fuss around the last two turns, and the Benz slides across the line in 1 minute 2.26 seconds. Hopefully this has been informative and gives you the ability to successfully tune your own cars exactly how you want them to be. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments below. If this video helped you out, click the like button. If you enjoy my helpful videos, subscribe. Either way, thanks for watching. Bye.